The shadow does not negotiate with the light. It simply exists. A man who apologizes for his nature has already surrendered his crown. Friedrich Nietzsche. They say women want good, polite, available, predictable men. But the reality is different, and it is brutal. Desire is not born from kindness. It is born from emotional power. While some men try to please, others dominate the game without asking for permission. This video is not comfortable, it is not moral, and it is not gentle. Here you will understand why apparent cruelty attracts, why needy kindness repels, and how instinct ignores everything you were taught to believe. There is a comfortable lie that has been repeated so many times, it has become dogma. The idea that women prefer good men, and that if they choose cruel, cold, or emotionally distant men, it is due to trauma, bad luck, or confusion. This explanation is convenient because it preserves morality, protects the rejected male ego, and avoids looking at what really happens in the psychological game of attraction. The truth, however, is more brutal. It is not about kindness versus evil. It is about power, perception, instinct, and emotional control. What attracts is not cruelty itself, but what it signals in the deep levels of the mind. The good man, who offers himself too much, who molds himself, who anticipates desires, who sacrifices without being asked, transmits a silent message. He needs to be accepted. And need is psychological weakness. No matter the public discourse about empathy, equality, or sensitivity, the female unconscious operates on another frequency. It observes behavior, not intentions. It measures emotional stability, autonomy, the capacity to impose limits, and principally, the absence of the fear of losing. The cruel man, or rather, the man perceived as cruel, does not demonstrate fear of loss. He does not negotiate his value. He does not ask permission to exist. From the first contacts, attraction is a silent test. The woman tests limits, not consciously, but instinctively. Small delays, mood swings, subtle challenges, provocations. The good man tries to fix, to please, to compensate. The cold man maintains his axis. He does not react emotionally to every variation. This difference creates a brutal asymmetry of power. Who reacts, loses. Who remains centered, dominates the rhythm. And desire grows where there is tension, not where there is predictability. There is a classic error that few admit: confusing kindness with the absence of strength. True kindness requires power. Apparent cruelty is often just strength without a mask. The problem is that the majority of good men are not good by conscious choice, but by fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of rejection, fear of being seen as inadequate. This fear leaks out in microcosms, messages that are too long, excessive justifications, total availability, inability to say no. The female unconscious detects this instantly, and what is detected cannot be ignored. The man who seems cruel is generally the one who does not explain himself. He acts and accepts the consequences. He does not try to control the image projected of him. This creates a powerful psychological paradox. If he does not need to be approved, it is because he has options. If he has options, his value is high. If his value is high, he is desirable. It is not a moral equation. It is an equation of psychological status. Desire is not democratic. It does not reward effort. It responds to signals. Another point that few have the courage to say: many women do not feel safe with excessively good men. Not physical safety, but emotional safety in the primitive sense. A man who bends too much seems unstable, influenceable, incapable of sustaining pressure. In moments of crisis, this type of man tends to implode. Conversely, the hard, controlled man, who does not become emotionally disorganized, transmits the sensation that the world can crumble around him and he will remain standing. This image triggers deep layers of the instinct for protection and continuity. There is also the factor of unpredictability. The human brain associates pleasure with variation. The man who is too predictable kills desire. The man who does not reveal everything, who does not give himself completely, who maintains inaccessible zones, creates a void that the mind tries to fill. And where there is a void, obsession is born. The good man delivers everything. The cruel man delivers fragments. The female mind works to conquer what is not totally available. This is not perversity, it is basic psychology. It is here that the most uncomfortable point enters. Many men, called good, use kindness as currency. They are gentle, expecting a return. When they do not receive it, they feel betrayed. This silent expectation transforms kindness into disguised manipulation. The unconscious perceives this as falseness. The cold man creates no debt. Paradoxically, this makes him more honest in the eyes of instinct. Therefore, cruelty is not what attracts. What attracts is the absence of emotional submission. It is the capacity to sustain one's own center without asking for validation. It is the willingness to lose without crumbling. The man who accepts loss as part of the game stops being a hostage to the result. And whoever is not a hostage has power. Desire follows power like a shadow follows the body. None of this is taught openly. On the contrary, it is constantly denied. Men are taught that it is enough to be good, understanding, and patient. When this fails, they say the woman is no good or likes to suffer. These explanations are moral shortcuts to avoid confronting reality. Attraction does not obey ideals. It responds to primitive signals of psychological strength, autonomy, and emotional dominance. And while this truth remains hidden, men will continue attempting to buy desire with gentleness, and women will continue being attracted to that which does not ask permission to exist. The game is not fair, it is not pretty, and it is not gentle. It is brutally honest. There is a point rarely said out loud. Attraction is not born of conscious intention, but of the unconscious reading of emotional hierarchies. Before any rational discourse, the mind evaluates who leads the rhythm, who reacts, who explains themselves, and who simply acts. The man who reacts too much, who tries to align every gesture to the woman's mood, communicates psychological subordination. And subordination does not awaken desire. It awakens tepid comfort, friendship, predictability. Desire demands friction, demands risk, demands the sensation that the other cannot be completely controlled. The unconscious tests are not moral traps. They are sorting mechanisms. They appear as delays, sudden changes of tone, silence, light criticisms disguised as jokes. The objective is not to humiliate, but to observe. What is observed is not the verbal response, but the internal stability. The good man tries to fix the moment. He apologizes, even without having erred. He rationalizes. He justifies himself. Each justification diminishes his position. The man who seems cruel, on the other hand, does not enter the game. He does not defend himself against vague accusations. He does not run after approval. He remains whole. This creates an asymmetry that the unconscious interprets as strength. There is a crucial difference between coldness and indifference. Coldness is control. Indifference is absence of investment. The desired man is not indifferent. He chooses when to invest. This conscious choice creates value. The man who invests all the time without criteria makes his investment cheap. What is cheap is not desired, not out of malice, but out of psychic economy. The mind seeks that which demands proportional effort. Another ignored element is selective emotional contempt. It is not about disrespecting, but about not granting excessive importance to everything. The man who is shaken by any oscillation demonstrates that his balance depends on the other. This creates unilateral power. Whoever controls the emotional state of the other controls the relationship. The cold man maintains his axis even when the relationship oscillates. This does not mean absence of feelings, but sovereignty over them. There is also the role of the internal narrative. Many women grew up hearing they should desire good men, but experienced in practice that these men, when frustrated, become resentful, demanding, passive-aggressive. The unconscious learns fast. It associates excessive kindness with future debt collection. The hard man, who does not promise infinite emotional protection, does not create this invisible debt. He does not demand a return for what he did not offer. This, paradoxically, generates more trust. Perceived cruelty functions as a filter. It eliminates those who depend too much on external approval. The man who endures being misunderstood demonstrates something rare. He trusts himself more than external opinion. This silent self-confidence is magnetic because it signals autonomy. Autonomy is the basis of respect. Without respect, there is no sustainable desire, only fleeting fantasy. There is still the factor of the limit. The good man frequently does not establish clear limits for fear of seeming rigid. He tolerates behaviors that displease him, hoping his patience will be rewarded. This communicates the absence of self-respect.
The man who imposes limits early may seem cruel, but he communicates something essential. He values himself, and whoever values themselves teaches the other how they must be treated. Limits do not push away, they organize. Where there is no organization, there is emotional chaos. Desire does not prosper in chaos for long. The human mind also responds to coherence between speech and action. The man who says he is understanding but explodes when frustrated breaks this coherence. The man who acts firmly from the beginning, maintains consistency. Even if he is seen as hard, he is predictable in his strength. The predictability of strength is different from the predictability of submission. One generates instinctive security, the other generates boredom. There is a delicate point few want to touch. Many women associate emotional intensity with risk, and risk is exciting. The excessively good man reduces risk to almost zero. He becomes too safe too soon. Desire in this initial stage still needs uncertainty. Without it, the flame does not ignite. The error is not in being good, but in offering stability before it is time. Stability is the prize, not the initial currency. Finally, it is necessary to dismantle the idea that the cold man always wins. He wins only in the field of initial attraction. Without consciousness, this coldness can become rigidity, control, or emotional emptiness. But while the good man does not learn to sustain his strength without asking for permission, he will continue being confused with weakness. And the unconscious does not negotiate with intentions. It responds to signals. The game follows unwritten rules. Ignoring them does not invalidate them. It only makes whoever ignores them more vulnerable. The fear of loss is the hidden axis of almost all emotional power dynamics. Whoever fears losing more surrenders more control. This applies to relationships, businesses, wars, and any human game. In attraction, this principle acts silently but relentlessly. The good man usually enters the bond already afraid of losing something he does not even possess yet. He invests in advance, creates expectations, fantasizes futures. This premature investment puts him in a vulnerable position. He starts protecting the relationship more than his own emotional integrity. And whoever protects something too much demonstrates they would not survive the loss. The man who seems cruel accepts loss as a concrete possibility, not as a distant threat, but as a manageable event. He does not build his identity around female approval. Therefore, when the relationship oscillates, he does not panic. This absence of panic is interpreted as strength. The female mind perceives, if he can lose and remain whole, then he does not depend. And whoever does not depend chooses. Whoever chooses has power. There is a perverse inversion that few see. The more a man tries to guarantee the relationship, the more he signals he has no options outside of it. And the fewer options he appears to have, the lower his perceived value. It does not matter if this is true or not. Attraction responds to perception, not objective reality. The cold man, by not trying to guarantee anything, creates the illusion of abundance. He may have a single option,
but behaves like someone who needs none. This posture completely alters the balance. The fear of loss also distorts behavior. The man dominated by this fear begins acting strategically to avoid conflict. He avoids saying what he thinks. He swallows discomforts. He negotiates principles. Each unsolicited concession corrodes his position. The woman feels, even without being able to explain, that she is before someone who abandons themselves to be accepted. And no one respects who abandons themselves. Without respect, desire transforms into pity, habit, or indifference. The man who accepts losing maintains his limits even under risk. He prefers conflict to self-annulment. This does not make him aggressive, but integral. Integrity is rare. Rarity generates value. Value generates desire. The equation is simple, but emotionally difficult to execute. It requires maturity to endure the discomfort of rejection without transforming it into drama, victimization, or resentment. There is also the effect of the emotional mirror. The internal state of the man is reflected by the woman. If he demonstrates anxiety, she feels anxiety. If he demonstrates fear, she feels insecurity. If he demonstrates calm in the face of uncertainty, she feels stability. The paradox is that the most powerful stability arises when someone does not need to control the result. The man who does not try to hold the relationship with excessive force allows it to breathe. And where there is space, desire can circulate. Another neglected point is the difference between attachment and presence.
The good man confuses the two. He thinks always being available is a sign of affection. In practice, this communicates attachment. Attachment is fear in disguise. True presence is conscious choice. It is being there when it makes sense, not when one is afraid of disappearing. The cold man is present when he decides to be. This decision confers weight to the moment. The man, always available, dilutes his own importance. The fear of loss also creates surveillance behavior. The man starts monitoring signals, interpreting messages, analyzing silences. He gets lost in the mental field. The man who accepts loss does not surveil. He observes, but does not fix-act. He responds to what happens, not to what he imagines. This difference in posture generates a brutal asymmetry. One lives in the now, the other lives in the anticipation of pain. Attraction does not bloom in the anticipation of pain. It is born in contact with the present. There is an uncomfortable truth. Many women only begin to invest emotionally when they perceive that the man is not guaranteed, when they feel they can lose him. This is not a conscious game. It is an instinctive response. The man who gives himself completely too soon removes this possibility. He puts himself in the pocket, and what is in the pocket is not chaste. Accepting loss does not mean desiring the end, but not fearing it. It is this difference that redefines the game. The man who does not fear the end does not need to manipulate, please, or hide. He acts with naturalness. Naturalness is seductive because it is rare in a world of emotional masks. When the fear of loss disappears, something changes radically. The man stops negotiating his value. He does not threaten to leave, but also does not beg to stay. He occupies a solid internal space. This space is felt, and what is felt does not need to be explained. Tension is the invisible fuel of attraction. Without it, there is no flame, only habit. The most common error of the good man is believing that immediate emotional safety generates desire. He confuses peace with attraction, but the human mind does not work like that at the beginning of a relationship. Desire is born from contrast, from controlled uncertainty, from the sensation that something has not yet been conquered. When everything is delivered too soon, there is no space for projection, fantasy, or emotional investment from the other side. Premature security kills curiosity, and without curiosity, desire atrophies. The man who offers guarantees before being asked removes the mystery. He becomes too legible. The female unconscious prefers to decipher rather than receive ready answers, not because it likes to suffer, but because the process of discovery activates dopamine. The man who seems cruel maintains layers. He does not reveal himself entirely at once. He does not transform every meeting into an emotional confession. He preserves zones of silence. Silence creates tension. Tension maintains interest. There is a psychological mechanism little discussed. Attraction grows when there is perceived emotional risk, but falls when risk becomes a real threat. The good man eliminates risk too soon. The cold man keeps risk under control. He does not threaten abandonment, but also does not promise eternal permanence. He occupies the unstable middle ground where desire prospers. This equilibrium requires emotional maturity. Without it, coldness becomes a cheap game or empty manipulation. The obsessive search to be chosen is a trap. When a man enters a relationship with the central objective of being chosen, he transfers power. He starts behaving as a candidate, not as an agent. Candidates please, agents decide. Attraction responds to who decides. The man who puts himself in a position of constant evaluation loses spontaneity. Each gesture becomes strategy. Each word becomes an attempt at approval. This internal attention is perceived, and what is perceived as excessive effort loses value. Another brutal point. Desire does not grow where there is total emotional equality from the start. This does not mean permanent hierarchy, but alternation of poles. In the beginning, whoever leads generates attraction. The man who tries to balance everything from the first moment creates a sterile neutrality. The man who leads, even running the risk of seeming hard, creates direction. Direction is attractive because it reduces ambiguity. Excessive ambiguity generates anxiety. Direction generates excitement. Tension is also born from the capacity to frustrate expectations without guilt. The good man feels guilt when frustrating. He explains himself. He apologizes for existing outside someone else's script. The cold man frustrates without theatrics. He does not make this an act of aggression, but also does not justify himself. This posture communicates autonomy. Autonomy is desirable because it suggests a rich internal world, not dependent on the other. There is also the role of intermittent reward. When attention, affection, and presence are not constant but coherent, the brain values them more. It is not about vanishing or playing childish games, but about not always being available. Total availability communicates internal scarcity. The man who has a life, purposes, and limits is not always accessible. This partial inaccessibility creates healthy tension. The good man, by centralizing the relationship, eliminates this dynamic. True security is built later, not before. When built too soon, it seems artificial, seems like an empty promise. The mind suspects. The cold man does not promise. He builds over time. Each gesture has weight because it is not automatic. The man who offers everything in the beginning makes his gestures banal. What is banal is not desired. There is an uncomfortable truth. Many women only allow themselves to fully desire when they do not feel responsible for the man's emotional state. The good man, by showing himself fragile too soon, creates this responsibility. She starts containing herself so as not to hurt. Where there is containment, desire represses itself. The man who sustains his own emotional structure frees the other to desire without guilt. Healthy tension requires that the man tolerate ambiguity without demanding immediate definition. The good man wants a label early. What are we? Where are we going? What do you feel? These questions are not wrong, but when asked out of anxiety, they destroy the flow. The cold man lets the bond reveal itself. He observes more than he interrogates. Observation is silent power. In the deep, the error is not in wanting security, but in offering it as a strategy of attraction. Attraction does not respond to moral strategies. It responds to primary emotional signals. The man who understands this does not become cruel. He becomes conscious. And consciousness changes everything. Respect comes before love, always. This order is ignored because it is uncomfortable. People prefer to believe that love generates respect, when in truth, love born without respect quickly transforms into dependency, possession, or silent contempt. The good man seeks direct love. He wants to be accepted, welcomed, validated. The man who seems cruel seeks internal coherence. He does not ask for love. He demands respect for the way he lives, thinks, and acts. And it is precisely this silent requirement that creates the terrain where love can arise. Respect is not asked for, it is perceived. It is born from the congruence between limits, words, and actions. The man who changes his principles to please communicates that his principles are not solid, and what is not solid sustains nothing. The female mind perceives this quickly, not as moral judgment, but as structural reading. If he does not respect himself, why should he be respected? And without respect, desire shifts to another place or slowly fades. There is a fatal error many men commit, trying to negotiate respect through sacrifice. They believe the more they do, the more they will be valued. The effect is the opposite. Unsolicited sacrifice creates emotional debt. Debt generates guilt. Guilt corrodes desire. No one desires someone who makes the other feel guilty for not reciprocating with the same intensity. The cold man does not sacrifice without choice. He offers when he wants to, not when he fears losing. Respect is also linked to the predictability of character, not behavior. The good man tries to be predictable in everything: schedules, answers, emotions. This creates monotony. The firm man is predictable in only one thing: he does not betray himself. This predictability of character creates deep security. Even if his actions vary, his core remains stable. The mind respects this, and where there is respect, desire finds a base to grow. Another ignored point is the relationship between respect and emotional authority. Authority is not control over the other, but dominion over self. The man who dysregulates easily loses authority. He may be gentle, but his gentleness sounds fragile. The man who maintains self-control, even in situations of tension, transmits silent authority. This authority is confused with cruelty because it does not explain itself, does not justify itself, and does not apologize for existing. There is also the question of admiration. Love without admiration turns into attachment. Admiration is born when the other represents something one does not totally possess. The good man tries to be equal, leveled, mirrored. The man who seems cruel maintains a symbolic distance. He does not dissolve in the relationship. He continues being him. This continuity generates admiration because it signals strong identity. Without identity, there is nothing to admire. Many relationships fail because the man tries to be emotionally accessible too much, too soon. He exposes deep insecurities before building respect. This inverts the order. Vulnerability without a base becomes a burden. Vulnerability with a base becomes intimacy. The cold man builds the base first. He does not open up out of neediness, but out of choice. This difference changes everything. Respect also manifests in the capacity to say no without aggression. The good man fears the no. He associates limits with loss. The firm man understands that limits organize the bond. When he says no, he does not explain himself too much. He does not apologize for positioning himself. This behavior establishes a clear line. Here is someone who takes himself seriously. The mind respects this automatically. There is still the respect that is born from healthy, emotional unpredictability. Not knowing exactly how to please someone creates effort on the other side. The good man makes the effort alone. The cold man distributes the effort. The woman starts investing to understand, to conquer, to maintain. Investment generates attachment. Attachment, when balanced, generates continuous desire. The problem is not kindness. The problem is kindness without structure. Kindness without structure becomes submission. Submission generates unconscious contempt. The man who learns to be firm without being hostile, distant without being absent, accessible without being needy, completely changes his position in the emotional game. Apparent cruelty is frequently confused with masculinity because on the surface, both share similar external signals: silence, firmness, emotional economy, resistance to pressure. The error lies in copying the signals without comprehending the internal structure that sustains them. Psychological masculinity is not gratuitous hardness. It is the capacity to remain integral under tension. Empty cruelty is just poorly disguised defense. The female mind distinguishes, even if it does not verbalize, when there is a center and when there is a mask. Culturally, men were taught that sensitivity is a virtue and strength is suspicious. The result was a generation that tries to be accepted via the path of moral approval, but attraction is not an ethical plebiscite. It responds to internal coherence. The man who tries to seem hard without emotional backing contradicts himself in the details, exaggerates silence, uses disdain as performance, confuses limits with hostility. This caricature does not sustain desire. It sustains short conflicts and unstable relationships. Functional masculinity is born from emotional self-sufficiency. It does not mean isolation, but independence. The man who needs to be understood all the time loses traction. The man who understands himself first creates clarity around him. This clarity is confused with coldness because it does not ask for license. It occupies space, and occupying space is a political act in the affective field. Whoever does not occupy yields. There is an implicit learning mechanism. Repeated experiences shape preferences. Many women associate good men with unfulfilled promises, emotional dependence, and future debt collection. They associate firm men with predictability of character, even with flaws. The unconscious prefers predictable flaws to unstable promises. Hence the confusion. Firmness is read as cruelty because it does not bow to immediate comfort. Another crucial point is conflict management. The man who avoids conflict at any cost communicates the inability to sustain friction. Relationships require friction. The firm man enters conflict without escalating, without fleeing. He does not dramatize, does not threaten, does not beg. He sustains tension. Sustaining tension is a rare skill. Rarity generates value. Value generates desire. Apparent cruelty is often just the willingness not to anesthetize conflict with empty niceties. There is also the theme of bodily congruence. The body communicates before speech. Posture, rhythm, eye contact, pause. The man who tries to seem hard without bodily congruence sounds false. The centered man decelerates the environment. He does not compete for attention, he receives it. This deceleration is interpreted as dominion, not dominion of the other, but of one's own nervous system. And the calm nervous system leads. Imitating hard behaviors without internal structure leads to failure because the mask tires, the mask leaks. In moments of pressure, the actor reveals the fear he tried to hide. Authentic masculinity does not need to prove anything. It does not show off. It decides. Decides when to approach, when to distance, when to speak, when to be silent. These decisions build a pattern. Patterns build trust. Trust sustains desire over time. There is still the confusion between assertiveness and aggression. Assertiveness is clarity without violence. Aggression is energy without direction. The good man flees from assertiveness for fear of seeming aggressive. The immature man embraces aggression for fear of seeming weak. The solid man chooses assertiveness. He says what is, what he wants, and what he does not accept, without spectacle, without apology for existing. The masculinity that attracts is not the one that humiliates, but the one that does not humiliate itself. It is not the one that controls, but the one that is not controlled by fear. It is not the one that imposes, but the one that sustains. This subtlety is lost when everything is reduced to the simplistic idea of being cruel. Cruelty is a label placed by those who expect concession and encounter a limit. There is a hidden cycle that governs many relationships and is almost never recognized while it happens. It begins with attraction, passes through unequal investment, advances to accommodation, and ends in silent contempt. The turning point almost always occurs when the man tries to hold what he should only sustain. Holding is fear. Sustaining is presence. The difference between the two defines whether desire is maintained or rots. In the beginning, the firm man attracts because he does not need. He does not revolve his life around the woman. He includes her. He does not place her in the center. This generates curiosity, effort from the other side, gradual investment. The problem arises when, after conquering, he changes position. When he starts fearing losing what he conquered, he starts holding. Behavior changes subtly. More messages, more explanations, more emotional surveillance. The woman perceives the change before being able to name it. The axis has shifted. This shift activates an unconscious mechanism of loss of respect, not because the man has become bad, but because he stopped being what he was. The addition attraction was not for the role of anxious caretaker, but for stability without dependency. When this stability disappears, desire loses its ground. Contempt does not spring from hate, it springs from instinctive disappointment. The mind perceives that what seemed solid was not. Contempt rarely manifests as open aggression. It appears as impatience, irony, distancing, less tolerance. Small comments gain weight. The man feels something has changed, but tries to correct it by offering more of what already does not work. This is the final error. The more he offers out of fear, the more he accelerates the process. Contempt grows where there is insistence without emotional authority. There is a cruel paradox in this cycle. The man who wins the woman can lose her in the moment he tries to possess her emotionally. Possessing here does not mean controlling, but depending. Emotional dependency transforms the relationship into a burden. Desire does not coexist with the sensation of being responsible for the other's psychological balance. When the woman feels she needs to walk on eggshells, desire retreats. Another point little discussed is that contempt arises when the woman perceives that the man would not leave even being mistreated. Not because she wants to treat him badly, but because this reveals an absence of self-love. If he accepts everything, the symbolic value falls. The man who does not accept disrespect, even if it costs the relationship, maintains his position. The man who accepts in order not to lose, loses anyway, just slowly. The cycle completes when the man tries to rescue the initial attraction with promises, declarations, and concessions. He tries to revive the beginning by offering emotional intensity. But the beginning was not emotionally intense. It was stable. It was the absence of need that created the space. By trying to recreate attraction by the opposite path, he reinforces the perception of weakness. Contempt solidifies. There is also the effect of the inversion of poles. In the beginning, the woman invests more emotionally because she feels risk. When the man starts investing more, the poles invert. Whoever invests more loses power. Emotional power is not domination. It is freedom of choice. Whoever needs more chooses less. Desire accompanies whoever chooses. Many men confuse constancy with insistence. Constancy is coherence over time. Insistence is repetition moved by fear. The first builds trust. The second builds wear. The solid man is constant without being insistent. He remains who he is, independently of the immediate response. The insecure man insists because he tries to control the result. The hidden cycle almost always ends with a distorted narrative. She changed. She grew cold. She doesn't value good men.
These narratives alleviate the pain, but prevent learning. The real change occurred in the axis of emotional power. When the man stopped sustaining himself and started clinging, desire lost oxygen.
None of this is conscious. There are no clear villains. There are only dynamics. Dynamics do not respect intentions. They respond to behaviors, and behaviors are born of internal states. The final error that needs to be exposed is simple and devastating. It is not kindness that destroys attraction. It is kindness motivated by fear. When kindness is born from the fear of losing, of being rejected, of not being sufficient, it stops being a virtue and transforms into a defensive strategy. And every defensive strategy communicates structural weakness. The mind feels, the body reacts, desire retracts. Integrating firmness and humanity does not require cruelty. It requires courage. Courage to sustain one's own axis even when this generates discomfort. Courage to be rejected without imploding. Courage to lose without reducing oneself. The man who develops this courage stops needing to choose between being good or hard. He becomes whole. Wholeness is rare. Rarity attracts. True humanity is not in exposing oneself indiscriminately, but in taking responsibility for oneself. A human man does not throw his insecurities into the other's lap, expecting care. He cares for himself first. When he opens up, he does so from a solid place, not a needy one. This opening does not weigh down, it deepens. The difference is subtle, but decisive. Vulnerability without a base generates aversion. Vulnerability with a base generates intimacy. The man who abandons the need to be validated changes the game immediately. He does not enter to prove value, he enters to live the experience. He does not negotiate who he is to be accepted. He accepts being rejected for being who he is. This posture reorganizes the entire dynamic. The woman stops being a judge and starts being a participant. Where there is no judgment, there is space for real desire. Empty cruelty fails because it is reactive. It is born of resentment, of the attempt to compensate for an old submission. The man who turns cold out of anger continues being governed by fear, only disguised. True firmness does not react, it chooses. It does not punish, it delimits. It does not close up, it filters. This firmness does not need to humiliate, provoke, or manipulate. It exists. And what exists with strength does not need to announce itself. There is a final point that needs to be said without romanticization. Attraction is not a prize for good behavior. It is not fair. It is not moral. It is not pedagogical. It emerges where there is presence, healthy tension, respect, and autonomy. Whoever tries to buy it with sacrifice loses twice, loses the desire of the other, and loses respect for himself. Whoever tries to force it with empty heartedness loses sooner or later. Only he who sustains his own center remains. The man who understands this stops asking, "Why do they prefer cruel men?" and starts asking, "Where did I abandon my strength to be accepted?" This question hurts, but it liberates, because starting from it, kindness stops being currency and returns to being a choice. And conscious choice is always more attractive than disguised need. When kindness is born from internal abundance, it does not beg, it does not charge, it does not explain itself. It is offered or withdrawn without drama. This freedom changes everything. The woman does not feel responsible, pressured, or guilty. She feels free to desire. And desire only exists where there is freedom. In the end, the brutality of the truth is this: no one desires who lives in fear of losing. One desires who would be fine even losing, not because loss is desirable, but because wholeness is irresistible. The whole man is not cruel. He just does not kneel emotionally. And this, in a world of masked neediness, seems brutal, but it is just structural honesty.